Good morning, beautiful people. Hope you're having a wonderful day so far. Today, we are going to be talking about sleep. We're going to be talking about what bad sleep does to you in terms of your muscle building potential and your body composition. We're going to talk about how to optimize sleep as well. So first is, what does bad sleep do to you? Well, it does a lot of things. It impairs your ability to lose fat. It impairs your ability to gain muscle. Really bad. It also ages your organs faster and overall reduces your quality of life. You have a higher likelihood. There's a high correlation between longitudinal sleep deprivation and mental disorders and metabolic disorders. So overall, reduced sleep is a bad thing. So when we're talking about the reductions in fat loss, we have a study where they compared 5.5 hours of sleep to 8.5 or 8, one of the two, I can't remember. But the results were, and they were both in a calorie deficit. The results were both groups lost the same amount of weight. So you might think, well, I guess bad sleep isn't that bad. Wrong. What they lost was different. The sleep restricted group lost 55% less fat. So they lost more muscle or lean mass, right? And they also showed an increase in ghrelin, which is the hunger hormone. So they were hungrier. And they also saw a reduction in their resting metabolic rate, which is the amount of calories it takes to keep the lights on, so to say. So you'll burn these even if you're just in a coma, basically. It just, they're always running. There are things to keep your organs running, your blood pumping, stuff like that. So that's the first study that we have, is we see, okay, fat loss is impaired and the ability to retain lean mass is impaired. Resting metabolic rate is down. That's already bad. And then we have another study that's fairly brand new. And this one looked at aging rates of different organs. And they found that if you have less than 6.4 hours of sleep, so we can just call it 6.5 hours of sleep, you are more likely to experience exponentiated aging of your organs, which again, not good. We're going to be, so far we're living less, we're losing less fat, and we're losing more muscle. Not good. And then when we look at the effects on hypertrophy, they're not as bad as you would honestly think. And I honestly think this is because it just really hasn't been studied that much. We don't have, when you really try to dig into the literature on sleep restriction and sleep deprivation versus, and then hypertrophy outcomes, we really don't have a good longitudinal study. We don't have any regarding resistance training where they restricted people's sleep over a good amount of time and they looked at hypertrophy outcomes or muscle growth. So we do know that acutely, so if you have like one night of bad sleep, it doesn't seem to really affect you that much. And I'm sure you felt this in your training, right? Sometimes you'll have a terrible night's sleep and you'll show up to lift and you'll just PR on everything. And that is possible. But we do know that long-term sleep restriction does seem to reduce myofibrillar protein synthesis. So we have the muscle building process is called muscle protein synthesis. That's the synthesis or the creation of muscle proteins. So if you didn't know, your muscles are actin and myosin are the two main proteins that are contractile within your muscle. There's other ones as well, like titin and the non-contractile ones. But the ones we care about are the contractile, actin and myosin. And we need to create that with muscle protein synthesis. But actually what muscle protein synthesis is both the repair and the creation of new proteins. So then we look at myofibrillar protein synthesis, that's getting even more. That's getting into the myofibril, not just of the muscle protein, the muscle as a whole. Because like I said, there's a lot of other proteins in the muscle. But when we look at myofibrillar, that's just like a step deeper. So that's even more, that's the real, truly what we're looking at, is if we can get myofibrillar, that's what we really want to look at. So we know that myofibrillar protein synthesis is decreased from sleep restriction. It appears to be rescued by resistance training. So they had one group with, I believe, so one group had sleep restriction and then they were doing HIIT, so high intensity interval training. They weren't doing resistance training. Like I said, the literature here is lacking. And then the other one was just, so normal sleep plus HIIT. Restricted sleep plus HIIT saw their myofibrillar protein synthesis was about the same as the group that was just sleeping. But what this tells us is that it's not really, that's still not a great thing, because anytime you train, you want your myofibrillar protein synthesis to be going above baseline. So all that's doing is just keeping you at baseline, which you're always going through a process of muscle protein synthesis, of creation and breakdown. So essentially, we only grow new muscle if synthesis is greater than breakdown. And if all that training did was get them back up to baseline, that just means they're not going to lose muscle, but they're not really going to be growing it that well. And again, there's not a lot of studies on this involving hypertrophy, but I think it's just a pretty good idea to assume that we're not going to be building muscle maximally when we are consistently under sleeping. Now, the true optimal amount of sleep, the organ aging paper smacks it at 6.4 to 7.8 hours. So, because people who had more than 8 hours actually showed negative outcomes as well. So chronic oversleepers, I guess. But that's where a lot of practitioners will say you need to get 7 to 9 hours of sleep. And I would honestly probably agree with that, because this study looking at organ aging was looking at just everyone. So the average person who's oversleeping probably doesn't need that extra sleep. But if you, as a resistance training individual who is ideally getting a lot of steps in as well, you're probably going to be needing more sleep than the average person. You probably do need that extra sleep. So I would say 7 to 9 hours is a good recommendation. So that's kind of everything that bad sleep does to you. Just as a recap, bad sleep is going to hurt your body composition, both in terms of you're going to be losing less fat, you're going to have a lower resting metabolic rate, you're going to be hungrier, and you're going to have reductions in your ability to build muscle. Not good. And you're going to have organs that age faster. All of these are bad. How do we have good sleep? Well, the first thing is, and the easiest, in my opinion, is just limit screen time. And this is what everyone always says, but how do you do it? How do I implement this? Well, the thing that I do is I just have on my calendar, I have a bedtime routine. I have it scheduled. And our bodies like routines. There's a reason why it's called circadian rhythm. We like having a rhythm. We like having consistency. And there's also evidence that your gut, your microbiome, has somewhat of a rhythm too that kind of correlates with the sleep. So having consistency in both your eating times and your sleeping times seems like a good thing for your body. Your body likes to do that. But anyways, having consistency in your bedtime routine. So we also have another meta-analysis that showed that going to bed, that having a consistent bedtime actually is correlated with having a longer life, more so than having a longer sleep period. So what that means is the person who let's say goes to bed at the same time every single night, but gets 6 hours of sleep every night, is going to hypothetically live longer than the person who goes to bed at a different time every night, but gets 8 hours of sleep every night. And it's funny because even the consistency only showed up in the sleep time, not in the wake time. So even if you're just going to bed at the same time every night, you don't even have to really necessarily, according to this one paper, right? We shouldn't base everything off of one paper. But according to this one, if you go to bed at the same time every night, even if you don't wake up at the same time every day, you should hypothetically have better sleep outcomes. Ideally, we're going to bed at the same time every night, and we are waking up at the same time every day, and we're getting a good amount of sleep. Again, within that 7 to 9 hours. So having that routine, having a good bedtime routine is also key. Staying off of screens. Avoiding blue light. Blue light essentially tells your brain to wake up. So blue light glasses are good if they have red tints. If they're not red tinted, they're not doing jack. Even if they have red tints, they might not be doing anything. But the way that I like to see it is if it's either a net neutral or a net positive, I'm going to do it because there's no downside. So the downside is I spent $13 on some tinted glasses and I look kind of weird at night. So who cares? But ideally, yeah, limit blue light around 2 hours before you go to bed and limit your caffeine from 6 hours. So the last meta-analysis that we have showed 6 hours is when you need to cut off your caffeine. But there's a caveat. There's a newer study that came out after this where they tested 100 milligrams of caffeine, which is roughly your average cup of coffee, and more than what you get from a diet soda. And they tested that right before bed, or 1 hour before bed, I believe. And there was no negative outcomes on sleep. So my honest recommendation is to avoid caffeine before bed as much as possible. Ideally, you're not having it 6 hours, but if you have a diet soda an hour or two before bed, it's probably not going to be that bad. And so we're limiting caffeine. Obviously, we're limiting alcohol. We shouldn't be drinking alcohol in the first place, but if we are, ideally, the last drink is 3 hours before bed. And again, back to the routine, having something that sort of winds you down avoiding screens. So that's the key, avoiding screens. But if you can, have the combo of the blue light glasses and night mode. Most things have night mode now, where it reduces the amount of blue light that's coming out. So your phones have them, laptops have them now. Even my TV that I have, that I bought almost a year ago, has a night mode, which is kind of crazy. And so if you have night mode plus blue light glasses, that's going to be a great way to do it. And then on top of that, we have your body likes cold. So setting up your environment is a good thing as well. It needs to be cold. 68 degrees is the scientific perfect temperature to sleep in. So that's what I like. That's what I have mine set at. And then I also have a fan because I'm just a hot sleeper. And your sheets, I like bamboo is great because it is moisture wicking and it will keep you cooler than just having, I don't know, like cotton. Oh, invest in good sheets. That's one thing I will say, is invest in good sheets. Invest in your sleep, because you spend a third of your life there basically. So invest in your sleep. Get a good bed, get a good pillow, buy a nice pillow, and buy good sheets. Also, avoid overhead lights. Overhead lights do sort of the same thing that blue lights do, where they tell you to wake the hell up. And so just invest in a bunch of lamps. That's what I did. And invest in color changing lamps, or at least color changing light bulbs for your lamps. They're not that expensive, especially now. And there's a lot of really cool lamps. And first of all, it's going to make you sleep better. But second of all, the vibe in your house is a million times better when you don't have just that harsh overhead lighting. And the other thing is, again, back to blue light. The reason why we want color changing lights is so we can make them red. Red, obviously, is not. Red is the opposite of blue in terms of wavelengths. So we want to have minimal blue wavelengths, because even if you have just regular yellow/white lighting, you'll notice there is sort of a blue hue. That's because there is some level of the blue wavelength that is getting through. So just as a recap for this routine that we're going to have, first is we're going to have a time set that we go to bed. That's non-negotiable bedtime. And then 30 minutes to an hour before, we have the start of our bedtime routine. And having a routine is also great because sometimes you won't even feel tired at all. But then once you start doing your routine, your body knows, okay, it's time to go to bed. So you have this routine of, we got the red light glasses, or the blue light glasses, sorry, red tints. We've got night mode on all our devices. We've got all of our lamps. We're not using overhead lights. We're killing the screens 30 minutes before bed. Read a book, take a hot shower. We got a cold room. We've got a dark room as well. It needs to be dark. If you don't have blackout curtains, get them. If you're in a situation where you can't get blackout curtains for some reason, then a sleep mask is great too. Mulberry silk is what I would recommend. It's nice. It doesn't get too hot, and it feels good on your skin. There's also weighted, it's called Nod Pod. It's a weighted eye mask. I really like that. It gets kind of hot though. So I would get blackout curtains honestly over a sleep mask. Another thing that I forgot to mention is weight, pressure. Weighted blankets have been shown to be amazing for sleep and anxiety and just everything in general. And just subjectively, I love them. Having just a nice weighted blanket is great. And if you don't have a weighted blanket, I mean, they're not that expensive, but I would just get maybe heavy sheets, like a quilt or something. And that will set you up to have better sleep than 99.9999% of people. And another thing that helps is hot showers, because it sounds counterintuitive because I just said we need to be cold, but you take a hot shower, it's really hot in there, but then you get out into your cold room and it helps drop your core body temperature. And then ideally you have this set up, and you don't have to overhaul it all at once. You don't need to have all of these things. If this sounds crazy and unsustainable, yeah, it probably is to just implement all of these at once. So maybe you just start small. Maybe you just start with some blue light glasses, and that's fine. You're still making pebbles, right? Progress over perfection. That's the reason why a lot of people will end up with terrible sleep and think that they can't have a nighttime routine, is because they try to do all of this at once. Just do what is sustainable for you. Like, I don't do all of this. I'm just telling you everything that you can do so that you can implement some of these strategies. Because at the end of the day, if you only do a couple of these strategies, but you can do them consistently, you're going to be much better off rather than just trying to implement them all and then falling off and then having periods where you're on and then where you're off and then on and off. It's better to just consistently do a couple things than to inconsistently do everything. That's what I've found. And the other one is, the thing that everyone's going to want to hear about is supplements. But once you have a good routine set in place, then you can start playing around with supplements. The first is magnesium. Everyone should be taking magnesium anyways, and working dose, you can go up to I think 600 milligrams of magnesium and even higher. So smack some magnesium. You can do glycinate is probably the best for sleep. So I would do like 600 milligrams of magnesium glycinate around 60 to 30 minutes before bed. Another great one is, okay, melatonin is one that everyone talks about and it gets fear-mongered a lot, hated on. Melatonin's good. It just, you shouldn't become reliant on it. It's good to have around, especially for nights where you just really can't fall asleep. And the other one that I really like is L-theanine. There's also ashwagandha is a good one, and glycine, especially if you're a hot sleeper, if you're a sweaty sleeper, glycine helps with that temperature control. And it's just an amino acid, so you don't have to worry about anything too crazy. And tart cherry juice can also, that has some benefits. It looks like glycine and ashwagandha. I take all that before bed and I sleep like a baby, but I also have a good routine. So I would say get a routine and then add in the supplements, especially because supplements are expensive. So you don't want to be just spending a ton of money on them. I mean, if you got it like that, go for it. But the routine, supplements are not going to save you from a bad routine. That's the key here. That is everything that I can think of right now in terms of how to sleep max. Oh, you can also mess around with kiwis before bed. So kiwis have a tiny amount of melatonin in them. And another thing is if you wake up a lot during the night, part of the reason that that might be happening is you might be going hypoglycemic. So it means your blood pressure is dropping too much. So what you can do to, or blood pressure, blood glucose, sorry, blood sugar. And a good way to sort of combat this is to have some form of fructose before bed because it's slower digesting. So blueberries and honey is a great one. Ideal bedtime routine is your food is going to have some form of fructose. So I like having blueberries and honey before bed in my yogurt as well. And you don't have to worry about having protein before bed. Don't worry about that. But you should probably space your food out before bed. You probably shouldn't have something that's super high glucose right before bed. You should probably have your last meal around 2 hours before you go to bed. And ideally, it's not something spicy. Capsaicin has been shown to have somewhat of a bad effect on sleep, good effects for lifting, and for metabolism, but bad effects for sleep. So ideally not too spicy. Ideally, we've got some fructose and some glucose and some protein in there. And that should be good. You should be sleeping like a baby. And I don't believe that I missed anything. So that is my sleep maxing routine. And again, don't try to overhaul your entire sleep routine all at once. Oh, and actually one thing we do have, if you have been in bed and you're trying to sleep and you can't, you just, for the love of God, you just like, I cannot go to bed. Try not to force it. And one thing I forgot, bed, your environment, bed is just for sleeping. That's a key thing, is make that neural connection in your brain that every time you go to lay down in your bed, you're going to sleep, because that is a very important thing. So stay off your phone. We already talked about the screens, so that's why I kind of forgot about it. But don't be doom scrolling in bed. And same thing when you wake up. Charge your phone. This is the easiest thing you can do. And I can't believe I waited until the end of the video to say it. Charge your phone in a different room. Charge your phone in either across your bedroom or just in a different room completely. Somewhere where you can hear your alarm, but somewhere where it's not going to be, somewhere where you have to get up to go to it. And don't snooze your alarms. So wake up, you have to go grab your phone from across the room. It gets your ass out of bed, gets you moving for the day. And so ideally your bedroom is just for sleeping as well. So your brain knows not only when you lay down that it's time for bed, just when you go into your bedroom, your brain's like, holy shit, all right, this is the place for sleeping. If you're in a studio or if you're young and you live at home and you have to spend more time in your bedroom, I understand. Again, you can only do what is possible and practical for you, but we're talking about maxing here. So ideally, the bedroom is just for sleeping. The bed is just for sleeping. At minimum, the bed is just for sleeping. Maximum, the only time you're in your bedroom is when you're sleeping. That's all I've got for you. Sweet dreams, my lovely people, and peace out. I will see y'all later.